She's sitting on the couch and I'm getting frustrated. So it's either going to be I rage out and make her cry more. I rage out and get her to rage out. Then I can act like the victim. I rage out and get her to rage out. Then we have this bigger fight and then I can leave. So there's all these different pieces of like, I need to figure out what I can do so that I don't look like the bad guy. So I don't look like I did something wrong. Narcissists have no empathy. There's no empathy that actually emanates from a narcissist. So how could a narcissist ever feel any guilt, any remorse, any regret, or anything like that? Have you heard that before? Has that been a piece that you've realized or that you've seen or that you've understood? You see, you have to understand mainstream social media and people that just get the word narcissism on their tongue start to go off the piece of, oh, no empathy equals narcissism. They take one of the 9 diagnostic traits, and that's like the champion flag of saying, oh, if this person doesn't have empathy, then they must be a narcissist. Now, there's other people in life that struggle with having empathy. There's other different personality disorders that struggle with having empathy, or they don't understand it, or they don't connect on the same level. There's different levels of awareness, of understanding, of just being able to figure out how do I actually connect empathetically. But what's interesting is inside the DSM-5, there's not this piece that comes out and says narcissists are incapable of empathy, have no empathy, void of empathy. It says narcissists lack empathy. Okay, and then it says, because it's not the full piece of their criteria that people get stuck on, it says narcissists lack empathy, is unwilling to acknowledge or identify with the feelings and needs of others. Now, do you see what the difference is here? The difference is we're not saying that narcissists are just this void of empathy. There's no empathy at all. There's this piece of this understanding and this unwillingness. That is the biggest piece. And like for me, this was mind-blowing when I first got this and I first understand this a couple years ago. Because people were so locked onto the piece of like narcissists have no empathy. And from their perspective, it makes sense. Because majority of people that are saying this are the ones that have been abused. You don't have people from the outside being like, yeah, narcissists don't have empathy if they haven't actually experienced it. But when someone's experienced it, you feel like there's no empathy because they're not showing you any. But I need you to understand there's a piece there that the narcissist still knows. There's a piece there that the narcissist still has this piece. Not this piece of like this amazing like emotional empathy that he's going to connect with you, but this piece of actually having this pinprick and this feeling of like, I know that there should be empathy here. I know that I should actually show this empathy. I know that I should actually have this connection, this love, but I don't. And I don't want to. And I'm not willing to. You see the difference? There's a couple different pieces here that I want you to be able to see and understand. But first off, just in the DSM-5, how it even reads. Let's make sure that we understand we have a good understanding and a good knowledge of what the actual diagnostic traits are. If you want to call a person a narcissist, call them a narcissist, whatever. But at the end of the day, at least know what the term is. Know what's actually going into it. I've got several videos on the 9 diagnostic traits, DSM-5, like different ones like that, where you can actually see and understand what are the 9. Read them straight out of like what they use to be able to diagnose narcissists. So like, hey, here's their criteria. You have to meet 5 or more to actually be considered narcissists, like to be diagnosed. So inside of this, empathy is one of the biggest ones that people will champion and run with. No empathy, narcissist. Boom, done. And you understand inside of this, narcissist oftentimes knows and sees and understands, even from a cognitive stance, from a logical stance, of what needs to happen with an empathy aspect. But the difference is not being willing to acknowledge your feelings and needs. Did you see this inside the relationship where he wasn't willing to acknowledge you? Your feelings, your needs, your emotions, your desires, they didn't matter. Because he wasn't willing to acknowledge them, typically because they're in the way of his own. They're in the way of what he wants. Your will is subservient to him. Your will is subservient to what he wants in the moment. You're supposed to be the slave to him. He's supposed to be the king on the hill, and you're just supposed to bow down and serve him. That's it. And so inside this piece of you having feelings and needs and wants and desires, I'm not really willing to see that, because if I see that, then I might have to actually acknowledge that I need to do something about it. I'd rather focus on me. I'd rather focus on what I want. That's the thought process. That's what's going on inside of the narcissistic mind. So we have to break down this piece of empathy. So I get home and my wife had found out on a piece of what I'd been doing over a period of time. Not cheating, but like there's been a lie. And it caused this argument, caused this frustration and this big blow up. And inside this big blow up, she got to the place where she was just beat down emotionally. So she was over on the couch, she was sitting there and she was just crying. I'm just weeping because of everything that had happened and transpired over the past like 20 minutes of this argument going back and forth. And when she's over there crying, there's like this piece that I felt inside of me that was kind of like this prick. This little like prick of like, she needs something. Because if I applied that to other relationships at that time, if I applied that to other cheating relationships, like that's how I would emotionally connect. I'd be like, oh, they're crying. I should go help them, right? I should go comfort them. I should build a connection there to be able to establish that bond. And so when my wife's doing this, there's this piece there, this like prick of like, I know I should go over and I should comfort her. I should actually sit with her. I should apologize, those things. Like there's this piece there of like, okay, this is something I know I should do. Now, the emotional side, there's not this huge emotional piece of like, she's crying. Oh, I'm going to cry too. That doesn't connect. That wasn't a piece that was even there. Okay. It was still so far disconnect. It's like she's crying. It was more of an inconvenience. Like I'm pissed off that she's crying. Like I'm annoyed that she's crying. I'm annoyed that I have to deal with this conversation again. Like all these thoughts are what's going through my head in that particular moment. But then there's this piece of knowing I should go over and I should comfort my wife, but I don't want to. Okay, the difference is I don't want to simply because if I do, what does that actually say about me? You're like, how does that make sense? You're supposed to go over and be nice and that would make you a loving husband. No, that's not what I'm saying. She's crying because of something I did. She's crying because of something I did wrong. That shows up in guilt. And then that shows up saying I did something bad. I did something bad, which is the guilt. I did something wrong, which is the guilt. And then I am bad. I am wrong. And that is the shame piece. That's the piece that the narcissist wants to run away from, no matter what. Like, I have to get away from this piece of who I am inside, so I have to put this mask up. So she's over there crying and she's upset, and I don't want to go over there because if I do, there's this thing that happens, which would be validating her emotions. And most of you hear that and you're like, well, yeah, that's a good thing to do because she's not crazy. I know. But in that moment, I didn't want to validate her emotions because invalidating her emotions would mean that I'm validating the reason why she's crying. Bear with me for a second. I'm validating the reason why she's crying. And when I validate the reason why she's crying, I'm validating that I'm wrong. So me walking over there and comforting her is telling myself that I'm wrong. Uh-oh. Now we're running into the problem of the narcissist telling himself that he's wrong. How many of you had your narcissist admit that he's wrong? And how many of you had your narcissist say that he's wrong or tell himself that he's wrong? Unless he's in great victim mode and he's doing it to be able to get supply from you, you've probably never heard those words from your narcissist. Typically because the focus is about me. The focus is about what I want. The focus is about the internal workings of my world, not yours, not anyone else's. And so he's only focused on that in that exact moment. And so when this is happening, my wife is crying. I know if I walk over there, I'm going to validate her emotions, which validates her feelings, which validates the story that's actually happening, which validates that I did something to make her cry. I don't want to deal with that because that puts me as the bad guy. Then I did something wrong. Then I am bad. Therefore, can't do this. So I'll just stand over here because it's easier to stand here and watch her cry and get pissed off that I have to deal with her emotions because they're unlocking part of my emotions that I'm not willing to deal with. So I get pissed off at this versus me actually engaging. Do you see the difference here? There's not this piece inside where I'm like, I have no empathy for you. There's this piece inside that says, I value me over having empathy. I value me over having feelings. This has happened multiple times in our relationships of this piece of not wanting to acknowledge her feelings simply because what that would mean for me. That happens even now. Not the same length and not the same depth of stuff, but the same piece of she's struggling with emotions. I will find myself getting frustrated because if I have to deal with those emotions, it means I have to deal with myself. It means there's something on the inside that's actually triggered me. It's something on the inside that hasn't been healed, that hasn't been worked through. And so now it's a whole different experience because I know when she has this heightened state of different emotions that are going on, like right now we're inside of the next baby coming and there's lots of hormones, right? So there's like emotions that are happening. She'll feel certain emotions and then all of a sudden I feel a pinprick of like, she's having this emotion and it's revealing there's an emotion inside me that I haven't healed, that I haven't worked on, that I haven't fixed, that I haven't dealt with. So there's always this piece of back and forth of realizing that a lot of times the triggers that are inside my life are simply pieces inside of me that haven't been healed, that haven't been focused on. And so now it's a completely different experience. Now I'm taking those triggers and taking those moments and using them in a way to be able to heal. in a way to be able to process, in a way to get curious and actually lean into her, lean into what's going on, lean into myself to figure out how do I create more emotional space internally so I can create more emotional space for my wife. Because if I don't do that for myself, if I don't create this emotional space, then everything that she does in that emotional space will be pissing me off. Because I won't have the space, I won't have the capacity to even handle it, to even open up that door of how do I actually engage? How do I get to a place where I can hold space for her to actually have her emotions, to share what's going on, and not get frustrated, not get pissed off, not shut down, not run away. Because that was part of my MO. She's sitting on the couch and I'm getting frustrated. So it's either going to be I rage out and make her cry more. I rage out and get her to rage out. Then I can act like the victim. I rage out and get her to rage out. Then we have this bigger fight and then I can leave. So there's all these different pieces of like, I need to figure out what I can do so that I don't look like the bad guy. So I don't look like I did something wrong. Narcissists are doing this all the time because they're trying to avoid shame, they're trying to avoid guilt, they're trying to run away from accountability and responsibility. And if they have to hurt you in the process so that they look like the good guy, they'll do it every single time. Because the narcissist in your life is not just lacking empathy. There's a piece that he knows what's actually going on, but he's unwilling to identify with the feelings and needs of you. If this makes sense and if it unlocks a piece for you, then I want you to go to rawmotivationscoaching.com. Because I want to help you actually be free from toxicity that you're struggling with in your life. If you watch this today and you're a man and you identify, oh, I actually think the same exact way, go to rawmotivations.com. Click on the one-on-ones and I'd love to be able to work with you. But go to the men's site that I have that actually is dedicated to this piece of identifying and connecting with guys that struggle with this. Y'all have a wonderful and a blessed day.